Welcome learners to another session on babyhood and developmental aspect. I am Professor Rosnembia Kim from the School of Social Work, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Now, when we talk of babyhood and development aspects, what are we going to talk about? Well, this session is going to talk to you about certain things about babyhood and its developmental task. The first and foremost thing that what you're going to learn is about babyhood, as to what is babyhood and what are the various developmental tasks of babyhood. You'll also be understanding the physical development during babyhood, as well as the different kinds of physiological development that emerges during babyhood. Also, the session will deal with certain skills developed during babyhood, as well as the emotional concepts or the emotional behaviors that develop during babyhood. So, let us get into the content of the program and see what does this session, babyhood and developmental aspect, talks about. Now, let us introduce the lesson. Babyhood occupies the first 2 years of life following the brief 2-week period of infancy. During the babyhood months, there is a gradual but pronounced decrease in helplessness. Babyhood is the foundation period of life because at this time, many behavior patterns, many attitudes, and many patterns of emotional expression gets established. And that is why we say the first 2 years of life is an important aspect for babyhood. This comes after the 2 weeks of infancy that a baby who is born into the world experiences. And during this period, a large number or a gamut of behavior changes takes place, and this is what we are actually studying. Now, we all know that babies grow rapidly, both physically and psychologically. Now, when they were in the womb, if you refer to the earlier previous classes, we know that the baby also expands now from the 3rd month to the 6th month to the 7th month to the 9th month. So they grow physically big, they grow rapidly. This is the physical aspect, and now psychologically also they are growing rapidly. There is a certain change not only in appearance but also in the capacities. Earlier, you will see that the face of the baby is not formed. Slowly and slowly towards several months, the eyes shift towards the front, the lip starts forming, the ear starts forming. So the limb starts forming, the finger starts coming out. So these are the different kind of physical changes that a baby undergoes. And psychologically also, the baby undergoes a lot of changes and capacities also in terms of able to fold hand, in terms of the ability to fold the fingers or move the mouth and the lips and start blabbering something, that is in terms of talking, the baby talk that we discuss about. Now, the decreased dependency on others results from the rapid development of body control, which enables babies to sit, stand and walk and to manipulate objects. So this is a kind of various capacities of growth that we are talking about. So we know that babies change rapidly from the psychological aspect to the physical aspect, and they're able to understand what the object is in front of them, and they're able to sit, they're able to stand, and they're able to walk. Now let us look at the developmental task of babyhood. What are these developmental tasks? Now, the pattern of development is predictable even though different babies reach important landmarks in this pattern at different ages, which could be slightly different. Now, we know that every baby is different. We cannot say or we cannot predict that every baby born under a particular time and period or every baby born will have the same kind of patterns, will develop or will show different kinds of patterns. This is not so, because different babies have different landmarks and it is different in terms of the ages, and it could slightly differ from a baby to a baby. Now, it is possible to set up standards of social expectations in the form of developmental task. Now, when you see a baby, like a lot of people say that the baby starts talking at the age of 3, or the baby starts walking at around 2.5, or we say that in a certain months, about 6 months, the baby starts blabbering. So these are the kind of developmental aspect that the baby goes through, or the capacities that we just talked about is what the baby does. So these patterns of development, as we talked about, is predictable Even though different babies have different kinds of landmark, they reach different landmark at a slightly different ages. So we cannot say for sure that every baby will emit the same kind of behavior. It could be different for different babies. Now, all babies, for example, are expected to learn to walk, to take solid food, to have their organs of elimination under control, to achieve reasonable physiological stability, especially in rhythms of hunger and sleep, to learn the foundations of speech, and to relate emotionally to their parents and siblings to some extent, instead of being completely self-bound as they were at birth. So these are the kind of certain developmental tasks that we talk of babyhood. So all babies, they're expected to learn to walk. Now, if the baby doesn't learn to walk at a certain prescribed stage of his or her growth, that means there's some problem with the baby. Or if the baby is not able to take solid food at a certain particular age or months, then there is some problem. Again, if the baby is not able to eliminate the dirt of the body, then there's some problem. So we see that there's a certain fixed procedures of tasks which a baby completes once they reach a particular month or a particular age. And during this, if the baby is not able to do so, then there is some problem. However, we are not talking about the problems here. We are talking about the development tasks of the baby. And therefore, we know that a baby is expected to walk, to take solid food, to achieve reasonable physiological stability. Now, that is what we call as a hunger. The baby has to have hunger. The baby has to learn to sleep. He or she should feel sleepy towards a certain time. And they have to learn to have the initial foundation of speech and be emotionally related to their parents. So this is what is some of the developmental tasks that a baby has to experience. And it is also important to note that the rapid development of the nervous system, the ossification of the bones, and the strengthening of the muscles makes it possible for babies to master the developmental task of babyhood. Now, the baby in isolation doesn't grow. Now, there are certain neurological aspects which helps the baby also grow and rapidly increase in terms of understanding certain strength of the body. So, we know that the rapid development of the nervous system or of the bone and of the muscles, the strengthening of the muscles, makes it possible for the baby to master the development task of babyhood. Now, when we talk about the strengthening of the bones, of the muscles, it is in terms of the ability to sit, the ability to stand, the ability to walk without any kind of support. So these are some of the developmental tasks of babyhood that we talk about. Now, coupled with this, it is also important to understand that babies who lag behind their age mates in mastering the developmental task appropriate of their age either have not been trained properly by parents or guardians, or may have internal challenges that needs to be addressed by trained medical professional. And this is exactly what we say when you talk about the developmental task of a baby. We know that the baby has to start initiating the ability to walk, to stand, to feel hungry, to develop the rhythm of sleep, to be able to talk, master the speech of talk. So now if at a certain period, as per the age mates, the baby is not able to master these developmental tasks appropriate of their age, then one has to definitely check with the medical professional as to what is wrong, or if the process of the developmental task of the particular baby is lagging behind or is going slow. So these are some of the things that a parent or a guardian has to really look into. For example, a poor foundation in motor skills or in speech will make it difficult for young children to master the skills in these areas of development. Now, why do we say speech, which is the most common? Now, in the contemporary society where we have a nuclear family, a child is born into a nuclear family where the mother and the father are working and there is no one to look after the child, just the maid or the caretaker or even some other person. Now, what happens is there's nobody to talk to the child, and that is why the speech is delayed to a certain extent. Now, when you look at the earlier period where the child is born into a joint family, you've got the grandparents, you've got, apart from the parents, you've got the grandparents, you've got the cousins, you've got the uncles, you've got the aunts, who day in and day out come in and go and talk to the child. So when the child is talked to, he or she picks up certain speech, and that's how he or she develops the foundation in terms of speech recognition and starts talking. And that is why it's really important to have a strong foundation in regards to everything during the developmental task of a baby. Now, in terms of motor skills also, about standing and sitting and walking, the ability to make the child stand and sit has to be initiated from a very young age, from a very, the foundation has to be made strong. So if a mother or a father is, in terms of parenting skill, is like an helicopter parents, then they will keep on holding the child. The child will not develop the muscles, or the bone density will not be strong for them to stand or to sit. So one has to really understand that a poor foundation will only result in delayed motor skills or in speech, and they will not be able to master the skills during the needed period of the development. Now, when you talk about the developmental task, let us look into the physical development that is there. Now, babyhood is one of the two periods of rapid growth during the lifespan, the other being puberty. So, babyhood is the one aspect where the child is well taken care of, is kept from different harms, and is always taken care of. Now, similarly, the other important period is puberty. But we will not be talking about puberty, because in today's class, we are looking at babyhood. Now, during the first 6 months of life, growth continues at the rapid rate, characteristics of the prenatal period, and then begins to slow down. So, the first 6 months of the life of a baby or of the parents are at a very rapid rate, because everyone is learning. In here, the baby is adapting himself or herself to the new environment that he or she is born into. The parents are adapting to the presence of another life form in the house. So, the period, the first 6 months period of prenatal period, the postnatal period is where things goes at a rapid rate, and then it begins to slow down. Now, in the second year, the rate of growth slows down at a very fast pace, because by this time, the parents or the baby, they are able to understand what is happening, and the baby also grows in terms of the physical ability, as well as the physiological ability and the psychological ability. Now, during the first year of life, the increase in weight is proportionately greater than the increase in height. So, this is where the child gains weight, where the child is breastfed, and post 6 months, the child is given a little amount of solid food, and then they start increasing in weight as much compared to height. Height develops later on, but weight is what is of significant importance here during the first year of life. Now, during the second year, baby gain weight and height. Now, what happens is, during the second year, how do baby gain height? This is, if you look at the first year, when the baby starts being given solid food, the baby tends to digest them, and that's how they gain weight. Now, by the second year, babies gain height, and slowly from here on, there's a certain increase in height. So, the height increases has to be as according to the age made. For a particular age, there's a certain height that is needed to be achieved. And if that is not achieved, again, medical practitioners have to be consulted for the same. By the time the baby is 4 months old, the baby's weight has normally doubled compared to the weight at the time of birth. Why is this so? This is because of the intake of breast milk or alternate milk has increased as compared to the time he or she was in the womb. So, by the time the baby is 4 months old and beyond, the weight of the baby has increased, and it has to increase basis the kind of food intake that the baby is undergoing. Now, at 1 year, babies weigh 3 times as much as they did at birth. So, 1 year is a long period of time for a baby to increase in his or her weight, because from 6 months onwards, what happens is they start eating semi-solid foods, and then they start, parents or family starts giving them solid food, and that's how the weight has to increase, and it does increase. Now, increase in weight during babyhood comes mainly from an increase in fat tissue. So these are the kind of physical development that happens during babyhood, where if you talk about around 1 year, the baby weighed 3 times of what they weigh when they were born because of an increase in fat tissue. Now, during the 2nd year of life, as body proportions change, babies begin to show tendencies towards characteristics body builds. Now, the average baby has 4 to 6 of the 20 temporary teeth by the age of 1 and 16 by the age of 2. The first teeth to cut through are the central incisors, and the last to appear are the molars. So these are the different set of teeth that develops in the mouth, where the baby is able to chew, the baby is able to grind, and the baby is able to consume food particle because of these teeth. So by 4 to 6 teeth out of the 20 temporary teeth emerge or is developed by the age of 1 and 6 by the age of 2. So these are the kind of teeth that the child has, and we know that the first teeth is the central incisors and the last is the molars that appears. Now, by the age of 3 months, the eye muscles are coordinated well enough to enable babies to see things clearly and distinctly, and the cones are also well developed so that they can see colors. Hearing develops rapidly during this time. Smell and taste, which are well developed at birth, continue to improve further on. So these are some of the physical development that you see in a baby. Now, babies are highly responsive to all skin stimuli because of the thin texture of the skin. Now, we know that the babies have a very thin skin structure when they were in the womb, and once they gain a certain amount of months, the skin becomes from transparent, it thickens itself, that we have studied. Now, here also they have, once they are out, postnatal period, once they're out, they are highly responsive to all skin stimuli because of the thin textures of the skin, which further on develop as and when they grow older. We just completed the physical development of the baby. Now, let us get into the physiological functions. Now, physiological functions are what? Babyhood, as you might be aware, is a time to establish the fundamental physiological patterns of eating, sleeping, and elimination. During the first year of babyhood, on an average, night's sleep increases from 8.5 hours at 3 weeks to 10 hours at 12 weeks, and then remain constant the rest of that year. During the first 3 months, the decline in day sleep is balanced by an increase in night sleep. From birth until 4 or 5 months of age, all eating is in the infantile form of sucking and swallowing. Chewing generally appears in the developmental pattern a month later than biting, but both require a lot of practice before they become serviceable. Now, this chewing also becomes a part of the development pattern because of the development of the teeth that is present in the baby. After being accustomed to food in liquid form, it is difficult for babies to adjust to semi-solid form. This adds to their revolt against food, even though they may like its taste. So that is why we see that a lot of babies tend to refuse food in a liquid form, because they get used to certain semi-solid form of food. Now, bowel control begins on the average at 6 months, and bladder control begins between the age of 15 and 16 months. So these are the kind of controlling power that the baby starts having on their own. Now, the habit of bowel control is established by the end of babyhood. Dryness at night cannot be achieved in the average child until several years later. So this is the reason why we have bedwetting by children at a very young age, because they are not able to control that much. And that is why we have to wait for several years till the time they are able to control their bladder movement during the night. Now, let us understand some of the skills, the baby skills that develops during babyhood. Now, what are babyhood skills? Development of skills depend upon three important factors. Number one, an opportunity for practice. Number two, an incentive to learn. And number three, a good model to copy with guidance to ensure that the copying will be correct. So these are the three important factors the development of skill depends upon. I'll reiterate myself. Number one, an incentive to learn. Number two, a good model to copy with guidance to ensure that the copying will be correct. And the first and foremost thing is an opportunity for practice. Now, before babyhood is over, babies acquire many skills. At first, they are unable to integrate the different parts of a skill, with the result that the skill is of little value to them. Eventually, integration takes place with practice. So what happens is, without any form of proper knowledge, the babies acquires many skills during their babyhood. Now, they are not able to understand or integrate the different parts of a skill till a certain time when the integration takes place with practice and they start valuing these skills. And that is why it is important for babies to be allowed the opportunity to understand and acquire as many skill sets as possible. Now, let us understand the concept of comprehensions in babyhood. The speaker's facial expression, tone of voice, and gestures helps babies to understand what is being said to them. Pleasure, anger, and fear can be comprehended as early as the 3rd month of life. Until babies are 18 months old, words must be reinforced with gestures such as pointing to an object. The comprehension of the baby depends partly upon the baby's own intellectual abilities and partly on how others stimulate and encourage the baby to try to comprehend what they are saying. Now, this comprehension will develop over time for a baby as much as people are speaking to them. So, the more you're spoken to a baby and pointing at certain things, the baby starts to understand. Whether you're asking a question, you're making a statement, or you're talking to the baby. Now, learning to speak. This is one of the most important aspects. Now, learning to speak is a long and difficult task. And because babies are not matured enough for such difficult and complicated learning during the first year of life, nature provides substitute forms of communications to be used. Now, what are these? These substitute forms of communications are known as pre-speech forms. So, when we say the baby talks, in a normal lingo, we say baby talks. So, these are the pre-speech forms, which are the substitute forms of communication for a baby who are not matured enough to start talking and learn the concept of talking. 4 pre-speech forms normally appear in the developmental pattern of learning to talk. Number 1 is crying. Number 2, babbling. Number 3, gesturing. And number 4, use of emotional expressions. Now, you've used as well as you've seen these 4 pre-speech form which appears in a baby. You might have seen it with your own child, you might have seen it with your own brothers, your own sisters, your neighbors, your aunts, cousins, everyone. So, we've seen these kind of pre-speech forms in a baby, which is crying, babbling, gesturing, and the use of emotional expressions. Now, what are the kind of tasks that is involved in learning to speak? Learning to speak involves 3 difficult tasks. Babies are learning how to pronounce words, a vocabulary by associating meaning with words that can be used to communicate meanings to others, and combining words into sentences that are understandable to others. These tasks not only involve control over the vocal mechanism, but also the ability to comprehend meaning and to associate them with words which act as symbols for meanings. Now, having said that, there are a certain kind of emotional behavior in babyhood. All of us know that the emotions of babies differ markedly from those of adolescents and adults, and also from those of older children. It has been observed that the behavior responses accompanying babies' emotions are too great for the stimuli that give rise to them. This is especially true of anger and fear. So we know that the emotions of babies differ markedly from those of adolescents and adults, because every baby goes through different stages and every baby has a different stage of emotions. But when you talk of anger and fear, this is something which great in terms of the behavior pattern, and we have observed, or it has been observed, that the behavior responses accompanying babies' emotions are great for the stimuli because it is what that give rise to them. Now, looking at certain common emotional patterns, what we see is that there are certain emotional patterns that are commonly found among babies. And what are these patterns? They are anger, fear, curiosity, joy, affection. So there are some of these things. Now let us understand what is anger. The common stimuli that give rise to anger among babies are interference with attempted movements, thwarting of some wish, not letting them do what they want to do, etc. All these things give rise to anger. Now, typically, the anger response takes the form of screaming, kicking the legs, waving the arms, throwing themselves on the floor and holding their breath, among others. These are the most common form of anger that you see a baby manifest while they try to show the emotions of anger. Now, the other emotional patterns that is found in a babies are fear. The stimuli that are most likely to arouse fear in babies are loud noise, strange people, new faces, objects or situations, dark rooms, high place and animals. So the fear response is manifested in an attempt to withdraw from the frightening stimulus, accompanied by whimpering, crying and temporary holding of breath. So these are the kind of emotion that arouse fear in babies, as we know, loud noise and all that. And how do they react to that? By whimpering or crying or holding their breath. Curiosity. Curiosity is another emotional pattern. Now, what happens with curiosity is anything new or unusual acts as a stimulus to curiosity unless the newness is so pronounced that it gives rise to fear. Now, how do they associate themselves with this, or how do they express curiosity? As the fear wanes, it gives rise to curiosity. Young babies usually express curiosity by tensing the facial muscle, opening the mouth and protruding the tongue. So this is kind of example in the ways in which they show their curiosity. Now, joy. Joy is also another emotional pattern that is commonly found among babies, and physical well-being of the babies give rise to a feeling of joy. By the second or third month of life, babies reach to being played with, being tickled and watching or listening to others. So we see a lot of giggling that's happening around, a lot of hands and legs movement of the babies. That means the baby is full of joy. The physical well-being of the baby give rise to the feeling of joy. And how do they express it? They express their pleasure by smiling, moving their arms and legs, and also by cooing, gargling, or even shouting with glee. These are the kind of joy that a baby experiences. Now, another emotional patterns that we commonly see in babies is affection. Anyone who plays with them, caters to their needs, give rise to the baby's affection. Because a baby will start associating faces with the kind of behavior that is shown to them. Now, toys and a family pet may also become objects of love for them, because that is what is always constant and that is what is always remaining with them. Now, babies typically express their affection by hugging or patting at times, even kissing the loved object or person. So that's how when a baby reaches out to you, or a baby is trying to hug you, or a baby holds you tight when you're trying to give the baby away while you're going to do some work. These are the signs of showing their affection towards you, and that's how they express their affection. Now, with this, we come to the end of the topic which we have just discussed, and I hope that you've learned a lot. And in case you have any more questions, you can always turn back and listen to this session. Otherwise, you can always call in to us, or you can email in to us on our website. Thank you.